This is the Multifaith Matters podcast. I'm your host, John Moorhead. Well, this is the podcast for Multifaith Matters. I'm the host, John Moorhead, and I'm privileged today to have as my guest Eugenia Rainey, and she is assistant professor at William & Mary, and I'm going to read her bio from her website. Folks can look in the program notes for a link to her bio and a piece that she wrote on the subject matter we're going to be discussing today, Santeria. Eugenia Rainey is a cultural anthropologist who studies religion as a negotiated process. She focuses on this process at the intersection of, I'm hoping I'm going to pronounce this correctly, Lukumi?
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
Wow, that's close enough. Or Santeria, and medicine in South Florida, through examining devotees' experiences and perceptions of the medical encounter and being well grounded in religious practice, she seeks to better understand how the healthcare infrastructure impacts constructions of race and lived religion, as well as how African diaspora religions in the U.S. support the healthcare needs of devotees and the healthcare infrastructure. Eugenia, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. It took me a while to get you here. I've had this interest for quite some time, so I appreciate you hanging in there and being willing to come back. This, okay, especially in what's largely my audience, it's not completely conservative Christians, but I think it's a good portion. Santeria does not get very much play or understanding, and it's the subject of a lot of misunderstanding. So for listeners and viewers who may have very little understanding and background in it, can you give a brief overview of what Santeria is, where it originated, how it developed in the African diaspora, and particularly in Cuba, and how we see it in the United States?
Sure.
Big question.
Brief overviews are hard.
Yeah. If it's not brief, that's okay.
Yeah, well, academics are nothing if not long-winded. But essentially, the religion that we're talking about arrives in Cuba via the transatlantic slave trade. The transatlantic slave trade starts at the very beginning, I guess, of the 16th century. Maybe it starts at the end of the 15th century. I'm not sure exactly on the numbers of when they first bring enslaved people to the Caribbean. But nonetheless, its origins are with the indigenous religion of the Yoruba people in Nigeria, Togo, and Benin, and they arrived in large numbers as a result of the transatlantic slave trade, really toward the very end of it, because they had a very stable and successful empire, the Oyo Empire. Oyo is an inland city in Nigeria. And so they didn't really get caught. They weren't vulnerable that much in the beginnings of the transatlantic slave trade. Certainly some were, but their numbers were low. But their numbers spike in the late 18th, early 19th century. So as the slave trade is winding down and the British declare the transatlantic slave trade illegal and their navy starts stopping ships, transporting enslaved people, and countries keep on changing their laws about slavery, that's when a whole lot of Yoruba people are arriving in the Caribbean. And so this is their religion as it is interpreted, as it's been made to fit within the Cuban context. A lot of Yoruba people were brought to Brazil, to Bahia, Trinidad. So there's different versions of this religion all over the Caribbean and Northeast South America, certainly a lot in Brazil. I don't want to digress too much if I start. Brazil's an extraordinary place with a lot to talk about. I don't want to digress there too much, but to focus in on Cuba, um, you have a lot of people, and of course they bring their religion with them and they reinterpret it through that system. Um, and emancipation happens in that process. And so that, all those things um, alter religious practice.
Okay, it's
Does that leave you with any further questions?
I'm sure we could spend the whole time just talking about the history. I mean, it's fascinating. One question I did have as follow-up as you were describing that, without getting too far into the weeds, you mentioned the various areas in which it's found. Does it, would it be correct to understand it as, does it have its own variants? Does it take on, as it takes on, as it's filtered through different cultural lenses? So would it be like, I think it's correct to talk about Christianities. There are different expressions within the umbrellas of religion. Are there different forms of Santeria in these different locations?
Well, Santeria is definitely a term that only applies to Cuba.
Oh, okay.
People in Brazil don't use it. People in Trinidad don't use that. People use terms like Ocha, Ifa, Changwu, Candomblé, um, you know, that's La Regla de Ocha, Olukumi, those are Cuban terms, but um, it's all Orisha related religions. And yeah, I mean, you could talk, they certainly are different, right? But not too different. There are fundamental through lines
Hmm.
for all of them, certainly. And there are lots of different African diasporic religions that they also, coexist with. That come from different groups of people from the kingdom of the Home and Benin today to the Congo River Basin and lots of religions that stem out of the Congo. So there are lots of different African diasporic religions. And Orisha worship I'm strictly referring to Yoruba incarnations in the New World.
Okay, that's helpful. Um, Santeria is often described as a syncretic tradition, which is interesting because I think all religions are in some sense syncretic, but um, it's a Yoruba religious heritage and it blends that with Catholic elements. How did this blending occur historically, and what kinds of misunderstandings arise when people assume it's Catholicism with spirits?
Um, well, okay, of course, loaded, but
Of course.
that's fine. So, yeah, I think you're speaking quite accurately when you say all religions are syncretic. So for me, it's not a term that I use. A lot of scholars and a lot of people use that term. I don't find it helpful.
Hmm.
Um, if that term is telling you anything, it's telling you that the religion is marginalized.
Mm.
Um, because, that's what happens. And when you're not marginalized, you don't have to explain yourself. And when you're marginalized, you're forced to constantly explain yourself. So whatever the case, I think a more helpful term is additive.
Okay.
It's an additive religion it doesn't function on an exclusive framework.
Hmm.
But to get to your question about how that happens, historically speaking, the Catholic Church in Cuba set up um, what are they called? Fraternities, Catholic fraternities dedicated to a saint in Cuba. They're referred to as um, oof, I'm sorry, my words are escaping me at the moment. Cabildos, right? So the Catholic Church has different cabildos dedicated to different Catholic saints, and the idea is that you teach people about Catholicism by, starting out with a saint, right? So they are set up, and they're segregated by ethnic group. One of the things that chattel slave societies are always concerned about is rebellion. Rebellions happen all the time. They're a constant issue. Uh, Everyone's always scared of rebellions, uh, sort of a bit. But when the Haitian Revolution happens in 1791, and then when Haiti's declared an independent nation in 1804, that really heightens fears around what can happen when slaves rebel. So the church and the state and slave owners, plantation owners, they're always trying to figure out ways to separate people. So the church segregated cabildos by ethnic group, and so it amounted to, right, a place where people could get together with people from their own ethnic group, speak their language, and worship their gods, basically. Did the church know that? That's a different conversation. The church kind of fluctuated between violent oppression and what some scholars have referred to as sort of a tiered syncretism, where church officials understand that people won't just suddenly become Catholic sincerely, but over time, if you give them time, they'll come to realize that that they should become, like, they'll get Catholic over time.
Mhm.
And so they took, in some instances, they took sort of a more hands-off approach and looked the other way while people continued to practice their religion. And then on the feast day of whatever saint that was, people would parade in the street. They would take their icon of that saint, and they would, have a procession, and they would have a feast, and they would sing songs to that, to that Orisha, as they would see it. So, well, that's part of how this sort of how these connections are made. Now, how they saw the connections between different Orisha and different saints. Of course, you would have to be in their head to say what that was for sure. But as the religion goes, everything in the universe is sort of animated by a che, like this energy that flows through the living world, and it flows through Orisha, and so it makes perfect sense that it would flow through a saint too. So saints were connected with different Orisha, generally based on emblems, on colors. Santa Barbara is the sort of most illustrative example of this. Santa Barbara is connected with the Orisha Chango, who's the tutelary Orisha of Oyo. So he's very important in the Oyo Empire, and is very important in Cuba. And his colors are red and white. He's a storm, associated with storms and thunder, a kingship, and leading soldiers in battle as a king. So Santa Barbara is red and white. She's got a tower that's looks kind of like it would be in a castle. She's got a lightning bolt, right? So that's storms. And the gender is not really all that important. And there's more to say about that, but I'll leave it there for now. So when you have this additive framework, and sort of a basic understanding of the world that that other groups, other people, other religions also are valid and have things to offer, it makes perfect sense that you would, you know, feel comfortable in, you know, in interacting with them. And so, since certainly people had to interact with the Catholic Church, it was required under Spanish rule in the colonial period. But it wasn't like it wasn't didn't it fit within the system. It wasn't strange
Mhm.
within the system. Um, so yeah, I guess that would be my commentary. Oh, but that said, it should be said that you know, within the community of people who worship Orisha, some people consider themselves very Catholic and consider, you know, their interactions with the Orisha just another way of being Catholic. Other people have nothing to do with Catholicism and reject it completely. Um, Other people fall in between, right? So different people engage and interpret it differently. And so this kind of depends on that whatever group you're talking to, whether or not they are consider themselves Catholic or engage with Catholicism at all. So my point being that there's a lot of scholars who will argue that it's not a syncretic religion because the Catholic elements of it are easily removed and don't really they're just visual, you know, more than anything. I think there are certainly devotees who would disagree with that, and there are devotees who would agree wholeheartedly with that. So.
Okay, that's very
Mhm.
helpful. Looking at Santeria through the framework of a lived religion, what are some of the everyday practices, rituals, offerings, divination, healing that practitioners and devotees would routinely engage with?
So it is a lived religion. I think it also helps to point out that it's also sort of very much a practice-based religion. So practice is important, and it's kind of the heart of things. When I explain it to students, we s- we there's sort of like four major components of religion: ritual, initiation, spirit possession, and divination, and those things all sort of flow and interact together. So, but it is not there's no orthodoxy or doctrine. So what people do is sort of it's going to be on an individual basis, but in general, um, people tend altars, right? You want to maintain your altars and your Orisha that you have in your home, and that involves, you know, praying and conversation and cleaning and food and drink, and regular everyday interactions that you would have with another member of your household, essentially. Um, so there isn't like a list of things that a Santero should do every day
Mhm.
or anything like
Mhm.
that. It really depends on the person, but taking time every day to acknowledge and honor and your ancestors and your Orisha, um, that is, you know, standard. Some people will pray about it. Some people will um, I guess probably if there would be anything, I would say it's a refreshing every day of those altars and those entities that are just a part of your everyday life and your household.
Okay, That's helpful. You mentioned the Orishas quite a bit. It would, I suppose, now is the time to ask you what can you explain what they are in Santeria, and then I'm going to combine this. We had discussed some questions previously with combine that question with another one. Um, how what are practitioners doing? Do they communicate with them? What role do the Orishas play in their interaction?
Well, um, I'm going to just a note for I'm going to use the term lukumi
Okay.
because that's I think a more respectful term. Century is a little not it's not a term I want to I realize it's the most recognizable term, but it's not a term that I'm particularly fond of. The lukumi is what Yoruba people were referred to as in Cuba. So that's that's the term that they use for themselves and their religion as well. So the Orisha are um, created by Olodumare to look after mankind, basically. Olodumare is the source of everything, the source of Ache in the world, the sort of the sort of spring from which everything in the universe flows. And so the Orisha were, I understand it, the Orisha were created by Olodumare to look after humanity. And so they have to look after kingship, after motherhood, after war, after technology, after innovation, after the ocean, after the rivers and the mountains, after the volcanoes, after fire, after water, after all the elements, right? There's all things, all the things in the world that human beings engage with or ponder. Um, the Orisha are the intermediaries for people, um, essentially. That's one way of putting it.
Hmm.
We could talk all day about it, but that's one way of putting it.
Okay. And how do people are they? In what ways do they interact with them on a daily basis?
On a date,
Whatever
well,
basis.
I don't know. I don't. All I do on a daily basis, who knows? Um, well, uh, on a daily basis. Depends on the person. If you live by the ocean, then you can go talk to Yemaya every day, right?
Mhm.
If you live by the river, you can go talk to Ochun every day. Um, and talking to them is really important. Speaking, having your voice heard in the world is really important. Bringing offerings and all it's the thing to remember about Orisha is that they all have their distinct personalities, very strong personalities. Ochun is associated in Cuba with sweetness and sweet waters, honey, passion, love. The things that make life worth living are associated with Ochun. There's so so if you were wanted to talk to Ochun, you would go to the river and bring her sweets or the type of fruits that she likes. Her color's yellow, so you would bring her peaches or um not bananas. But like peaches, or mangoes, or sweet yellow fruits you would bring to her and talk to her about what it is that you want her to know about your life. You wouldn't talk about everything. You would only talk about things in your life in particular. Um, and many people would say that you only talk to her about good things because she's going to multiply whatever you talk to her about. So if you tell her your troubles, you're just going to have more troubles. Don't tell her about your troubles. Yeah, you would go to the ocean or a big body of water and bring her, dark grapes or plums or something that she's understood to like, molasses cookies or something like that, and talk to her, and you tell her your problems. That'll be okay. She's maternal, she doesn't mind. um and Chongo, you would, go to a pole, and him you would bring bananas, um, or, something else, and talk to him about, you know, that you feel you've been wronged and you need to, to figure out how you can prevent this wrong that has happened to you. But you have to, one of the things to keep in mind about the Orisha is they have personalities, and you can make them mad or you can make them happy. They can appreciate what you have to say, and they cannot appreciate what you have to say. So you have to, it's about kind of understanding the personality and appreciating uh, the personality that they have. Um, so, I mean, that's one illustration. There are numerous ones. Yeah, there are many things, and so those are locations. Um, yeah. I don't know. What's your next question? I feel like I am going sideways on this one.
That's
What's
okay. No, I appreciate you sharing all of that. You covered a little bit of this when you sketched the history with the slavery, the slave trading connection with it, the trauma associated with that, cultural suppression, forced conversion, those kinds of things. How did that history or that element of the history shape the religion's rituals, maybe issues of identity in practitioners, those kinds of things?
How does slavery and oppression affect religion? I mean, uh, of course, it's hard to say how does slavery and oppression affect a group of people, right, who experience it, and how does it affect people that don't experience it at all, right? Everyone's affected by it, whether or not they experience it directly or not, but they're affected by it in different ways. So certainly, secrecy is part of that, right? And the need to protect yourself from harm is certainly a part of that. Chattel slavery is based on a lot of violence, right? A lot of interpersonal violence. That's what maintains that system. So a great deal of African diasporic religions writ large are to help people be protected from violence. That is pretty ubiquitous within a system of chattel slavery.
Hmm. Shifting gears, um, there is one of the concerns I've had over the years is that evangelical Christians, conservative Christians in general, tend to look to so-called form experts, former members of given religious traditions. There's a gentleman out there named John Ramirez who is a self-described evangelist. He claims he was involved in the past in Santeria. He says he was a warlock. And he lumps all of his alleged past experiences into the occult, and he includes Santeria, and he calls all of that satanic. So he calls himself a former Satanist. And unfortunately, you find that a lot amongst conservative Christians. And he unfortunately has a large audience. So, from a scholarly perspective, can you just speak to that? What is inaccurate about lumping this tradition with Satanism, which is a separate area of religious tradition on its own? And why do you think such narratives like that gain traction?
Well, I mean, speaking historically, it's just more anti-Black racism in the world. I mean, that's pretty straightforward. I mean, chattel slavery needed to be justified, and it tied your social status to your and your enslaved status to the color of your skin. And that creates a society that's really rooted in a lot of anti-Blackness, and it comes up in many different forms. Um, and a lot of it involves ways to justify violence against Black bodies. And that strikes me as about a lot of what's going on there. The idea that people who aren't like you are deviant because they're not like you is a terrible way to think about the world. And it leads to many um, twisted conclusions about the world. Um, I can't um, speak too much to that individual, but I have to say I have observed in my own life and in other people's lives that I don't think we change all that much over time as far as our personalities go. So those aren't the actions of somebody with personal integrity. Those are the actions of somebody that you should be really concerned about their motivations.
Hmm. Well, for any Christians who are concerned about my raising critique in this area, this is not the first time this happened. I mean, years ago there was Mike Warnke who claimed to be a former Satanist high priest, and then some journalists did some research and found out that time he claimed in his book that he was performing these satanic rituals, he was in fact serving in the military. So his story was made up, and he constructed a ministry around that. So it's unfortunate it does happen. But moving along from that particular thing, what are some of the most common stereotypes that people have about Santeria?
Um, I don't think that's a question that I can answer very well. Maybe you could answer that. I don't know. Marginalized religions have are constantly misinterpreted in negative ways. That's part of being marginalized is everyone, the mainstream society is always demonizing you and your whatever it is that you're doing, you're considered suspect. Um, so and that's it's what can I say to stereotypes? I mean, stereotypes are generally, as a cultural anthropologist, it's interesting to dissect stereotypes. On some level, as a cultural anthropologist, that's not what I do
Mhm.
personally. Um, but spending time examining specific stereotypes that people have, other than assuming that everything that people do, they do for money or love, or out of malicious intent. Um, Other than that, what stereotypes? I suppose one of the big things would be, and it's kind of in the beginning of the opening of that Sublime song, right? I don't practice Santeria. I ain't got no crystal ball, right? And it's the assumption that that people involved in leukemia and religions like it have some sort of really strong power and some ability to see the future, things like that. That's often what people misunderstand about divination, that it's about seeing the future, but it's not about that. The point of divination is to manifest good outcomes in your life. That's the point, right? And that's the point of leukemia. It's to manifest good outcomes in your life, to help you to get your kid into school to help you to be a good parent and, know how to handle your kid's personality. Um, it's to help you get through school, to find a job, to, find a house that you can be comfortable in, to work, help you to, have peace of mind when you're dealing with family troubles. And it's through divination that you get the advice you need and the rituals you need to help you to keep the spiritual world copacetic and okay, because the understanding is that um you live in the world, right? And there's people in the world, and you have family members and coworkers and neighbors, and you have ancestors and Orisha and various and sundry other spirits in the invisible world. And that's a very crowded world, and you're we know you're constantly interacting with it, and sometimes it gets out of whack and you need to get it back into balance. It gets thrown out of balance and you need to rectify it, and you do that through rituals. And when you get the spiritual world back into balance, the material world works a lot better for you. And so divination is not to tell you the future, because the future is not written. The future, anything can happen in the future. And that in part depends on where you're at with the spiritual world and the spirits that are around you, the spirits that you cultivate in your life so that your life is rich and full. Um, that is what's happening with divination. I guess that would probably be the most common misunderstanding that people have. I've certainly had people come up to me and ask me to, like get rid of their daughter's boyfriend and, like nonsense like that. Which isn't helpful. Your daughter might well need to deal with that boyfriend that you don't like. Just because you don't like it doesn't mean it's a problem spiritually. So yeah.
Okay, that's helpful. Well, one final question. What advice would you give? We live in a society now that's just polarized, and we often interact with each other with very little accurate information. We stereotype each other, sometimes literally demonize each other. What advice would you give in our present environment where people, how can we do better in trying to understand minority religions and their devotees, and how can we be better citizens in the process in doing that? Any thoughts on that?
Um, sure, sure. How can we be better in the world? I mean, being open and understanding of other people is important, Uh, one of the things that I think it's important to keep in mind about people is that we all um are, well, hmm, um let's say whenever I run into somebody that upsets me or I disagree with something that they've done, I take a step back and remind myself that whenever a human being takes an action, they do it understanding that they're doing the right thing. Even if 30 seconds later they realize that it wasn't the right thing and they backtrack, when they take action, we all rationalize our actions with the understanding that it's the right thing. How long we hold on to that is another question, but that's what we do when we take action. And so I always, no matter how upset I get, I step back and think, okay, what motivated the person to take this action? Like, what did they think they were doing? Um, and I spend my time and energy on that rather than being angry at something that someone did that upsets me. And also a lot of patience and humility, because I know I'm not perfect. I don't know anybody who is perfect. Um, and we have to have grace for one another in order to get through the world. It's hard to get through the world. As I tell my kids, life is hard. And even when it's easy, it's hard. So just imagine how hard it is when it is hard, when you do have to go through pain in your life. And everyone I know um, has pain in their life and things that hurt them, and insecurities and personal trauma. And so I try to always remember that when I'm upset with somebody.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you taking the time to come and discuss and share your expertise on Santeria. Can you recommend a couple of good books maybe that folks who want to pursue this further, they can take a look at that? Anything comes off the top of your head?
Yeah, well, Joseph Murphy's, Santeria, I think an African religion in the New World. I hope I'm saying that right. But Joseph Murphy's written a lot of good texts, as has Marianne Clark. Marianne Clark wrote a book about titled, oh dear, I should have checked the titles before I came. But Marianne Clark wrote a book about Santeria for people who don't know anything. And certainly it is important to know something before you step in, because the more you know, the better. Yeah. Um, uh, yeah, I think those are the two that I would recommend off the top of my head, for people to refer people to. Yeah.
Okay, that's very helpful. Again, thank you for coming. This my guest has been Eugenia Rainey, and folks can look in the program notes again for her bio and some recommended sources for tracking this down if they want to learn more. So again, thank you so much.
Okay.